Welcome to Health Matters with Dr. Nelson Bulmash, sponsored by the UI Radio Network at uiradionetwork.org. Catch us on Facebook and Instagram at United Intentions and Twitter at Higher Intention. Look for us on 99.1 FM, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Stitcher, Blog Talk Radio, and many more. Over the next hour, we'll introduce you to some fascinating people and engaging discussions that may provide you with answers to assist in revolutionizing your own personal health. And now, here's Dr. Nelson.
Hello, I'm Dr. Nelson Bulmash, the host of Health Matters on the UI Media Network. If you're catching the show right here in Atlanta on Talk 10 FM or WDJY FM 99.1, welcome. Also want to acknowledge our folks in Kentucky and in Ohio who are now going to be listening to us on WMTA 107.3. It's great to have you listening along. For the rest of you who are either listening to us on Binge TV or on all the major social media platforms across the known universe, it is a pleasure. Thank you, and know that I really appreciate my friends, followers, and fans. It means a great deal to me. For those of you who are new, I'm a chiropractor, naturopath, and nutritionist, among other things. And my show, Health Matters, is dedicated to discussing the very best of health, inspiration, and spirituality. Before we get started to my main feature here, my guest today, I want to go through a few talking points that are very important. Many people are still asking me about how they can catch our shows. It's very, very simple. Go to www.uimediaapp.com and you can download our UI Media app. Once again, that's www.uimediaapp.com. That way, you can catch us anytime. A lot of you contact me and say, hey, how do I get a hold of your show? You download that app. You can see it 24/7. Also, don't forget to connect with us online. You can follow us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as United Intentions and Higher Intention on Twitter. For those of you who are interested, UI Media Network offers a host of advertising choices, even if your budget is limited. So if you want to talk business to grow, call us at 678-495-4345. And we can find some special for you to help boost your business by making a commercial that suits you. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Best Self, Better World with Maria Walden-Sullivan as she interviews interior designer Diane Gayer. And lastly, folks, very exciting news. We are now on Binge Networks TV. You can catch us by simply going to www.bingenetwork.tv and look for United Intentions. That's UITV under channel 12783. That's 12783. Our new channel is featured on Apple TV, Google Play, Roku, Amazon Fire, and many, many more. All right. Very, very pleased to be introducing today's guest. He has been a very dear friend of mine for over 30 years. I can't believe I'm saying that. He is Dr. Fred Blum. He's a transformative coach. Dr. Blum is an expert in helping people live the lives that they were made for. And I'm not kidding when I say that. He's a real power broker here. It doesn't matter if you're the CEO of a billion-dollar corporation or a stay-at-home mom. When that deep inner voice just won't shut up and you can't ignore it any longer, he's your man. As a transformative coach and speaker, he's been helping executives and high performers create powerful results in the world while maintaining balance of of body, mind, spirit for over 3 decades. Does it feel like you've lost your way somewhere? Have you succeeded in one area of life only to find another area in breakdown? Is your business thriving at the expense of your relationships or your health or your well-being? Are you sick or are you in pain, stressed out, anxious, depressed, or not living up to your own high standards? Trying to push through this situation is like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. Not a very good idea. It's time for a new approach. He works with high performers like you to help uncover the peace and clarity already within you. Nothing to add, no new techniques or methods to learn. His background includes a variety of training and experiences that led him to this profession. He has degrees in psychology and chiropractic. He studied human transformation with some of literally the most brilliant minds in the world. He's trained in martial arts for over 40 years and even performed in, I didn't know this about you, Fred, off-Broadway comedy troupe. Love it. He's also been picked on as a kid, declared bankruptcy, and been divorced. So he's lived a lot of the trials and tribulations that many of us have as well. So he knows from experience, and that's always the best. You can never tell which life experiences will produce the greatest gifts if you stay in the game. His work is about supporting you to live an energy rich life, a life of productivity, vitality, peace, connection, and happiness. The difference is we begin with your ultimate goal: peace, clarity, and happiness, and help you to create an amazing life from there. Fred, I love that. And what's so neat about this is, yeah, I hope you don't mind. I want to share a story about you.
Oh,
You know,
please.
one of the things I loved about you, you were so serious about your personal growth and studies. I remember being in lecture because you and I met in chiropractic school. What was it, in like
Yeah,
1987, something like that?
something like that. It was a long time ago.
Long, long time ago. And every time I turned around, you and I, we were great friends. We have always been great friends since the time you remember when I met you. We like hit it off immediately. So we've been very dear friends ever since. And every time I turned around, like even on breaks between lectures, you'd be reading some book about transformation, about empowerment, about consciousness. So it's so apropos that here I am interviewing now on the topic that you love so much. It's such a pleasure to have you here. Welcome.
30 years later, even next week.
Well, it's just so amusing to me because, like I said, I remember you saying, "Come on, Fred, let's get some coffee, let's get some tea, let's get something to eat," and you'd be head down in the middle of a great book.
I tell you, it's been a lot of books.
Yeah, I can't. I know you went through a lot when I knew you, so I can't even imagine where you're at now. Well,
Yes.
Let's open up this conversation, and I want to mention a couple things because I love your bio here. One of the things that I've always noticed, and so I'm so happy because whenever I interview somebody, I go in with the intent that I'm going to focus on some area of my life. And you really nailed it here. I want to go back to this for just a moment. When I read this, it made me pause. And it says, it reads as follows: does it feel like you've lost your way somewhere? And it talks about, you know, do you basically put more effort and more time into one area of your life only to have another fail? And I
Mhm.
remember, relationships, as you know, are very important to me. I'm somebody who I make friends, they last for many, many, many years. I'm not somebody who meets people and then I'm on to somebody else, in another week or so. I'm that person that I have friends now for 40 and 50 years. So, what I love about that is I really want to focus on bringing that understanding to life here as we go through this meeting. I want this to be the underlying theme that you can have it all, that you can learn to balance your mind, create a state of consciousness that allows you to have very successful relationships, as well as being excellent in the world at whatever your goals are. So you can acquire your goals, you can be successful at work, and you can have great relationships with your family. So I want that to sort of be the background theme as you and I explore the notion of what consciousness is. And we're going
Yeah.
to do all this in an hour, Fred.
We're gonna. That's a big job.
I know it
Do
is.
it.
And what we'll do is we'll create an interesting thought process, and people will enjoy following it. And then again, you and I will do some other show together where we can pick up because obviously we can't do it all in an hour. But let's get started here. Let's talk
Okay.
about the nature of consciousness. I want to pursue a conversation that where we look at true nature, and correct me, you know much more about this topic than I do, but I'm going to call it your true nature versus your ego nature.
Exactly. Okay, so that's a perfect place to start. Um, so, for the sake of people listening or watching, it would be helpful if we could just come to a basic agreement here. Okay,
Okay.
that you just made the perfect distinction. So, on one hand, we've got what we might call the ego,
Right.
um, the identity, the personality. This is kind of who we walk around as most of the time.
Right.
You know, and another term that's maybe less common, but I use sometimes is what we might call the separate self. In other words, that part of us that believes that we are separate from everyone else and everything. Like I begin and end right here with my skin.
Right. So this is a self-assembled construct of what we call ourselves or our identity.
Absolutely. And we can get into the whole idea of what it means to be a construct. And
Right.
yes, exactly. And on the other side, on the other hand, we have what we might call true nature. And we'll get more into really what that means, at least to
Right.
me, but true nature is our true identity. It's who we are behind the personality, behind the ego. It's who we really are. And I'll say this much just to get started, that the nature of who we are is inherently peace, love, clarity, authenticity, happiness.
Right.
And the paradox is that from an ego perspective, see the nature of the ego is constant seeking, constant dissatisfaction. In other words, it's always trying, striving, seeking wholeness. And the paradox is that it misses that who we already are is all of those things.
And already there.
Already there.
Yes.
We're already there.
Right.
So it's like it's almost, I don't know if this is actually a biblical allegory, but it's as though you ride into town on the donkey asking, has anyone seen your donkey?
Okay.
Like, where are my glasses? My glasses are
on top of your head. Right. Right.
And this is the thing, is we are already that we have been seeking.
I love it. Very, very good.
Yeah.
So you do a lot of work with people, Fred. You are known for doing a lot of high performance work. How do you get started with somebody to get them aware of this is their construct? This is how they see themselves in the world versus we have this true nature that possibly creeps out occasionally if we work to create a balance between our true nature and our ego. How do you begin with somebody to get them to understand that this construct that we call our ego is a tool? It's not the be all and the end all of who we are from a conscious perspective.
Yeah, and well, that's a really good point that I'll just touch on that and then we'll come back to your question. That the point here isn't to get rid of the ego, right? Like
right.
Sometimes there's some spiritual traditions or whatnot that might say your job is to destroy your ego. But the reality is we need an ego to function out here in this world.
Right. Got it.
You really, your mind, which is part of your ego, really can't go to oneness. It can get a glimpse of it, but it can't exist in that world.
Okay.
So we require an ego. Sometimes I call the ego like your spacesuit. It's kind of like this thing that we have to put on in order to function out here in this world.
Okay. Very good. Got it.
So, when I meet somebody, a client for the first time, it's really just, first, obviously, it's just kind of to find out who they are, what's their goals, what is it that they're trying to achieve? Why are we talking, in essence? And there isn't I don't so much operate from a methodology, like some sequence of steps. It's really just kind of gently meeting people wherever they are in terms of their life, what their current reality is, their current belief system, and then gently just kind of pointing towards their true nature, pointing towards in reality who they are. And as we do that, it's almost magical, really. But there's something that happens just by continuing to look in the direction of who we are.
Right.
That something begins to emerge. You can't have a direct experience of true nature, but you can almost like glimpse it out of the corner of your eye.
Sure.
And that glimpse, one glimpse of this, of who we really are, I believe it sort of ripples into our ego, So the goal is to live as an ego, as an identity, as a personality, but also that to have that ego be a greater expression of who we really are. To have a greater expression of that love, peace, and clarity that kind of infuses our life naturally. You don't have to add it. You don't have to go get it from the outside. You just begin to recognize it as who you already are.
Excellent. Fred, we're going to take a quick break and let our sponsors get a word in. I'm Dr. Nelson Bulmash. You're listening to another episode of Health Matters. I'm talking to Dr. Fred Blum, and we're exploring the notion of consciousness.
Hollywood's best kept secret to rebuild strength and slow down the aging process like never seen before is now available worldwide. This is truly a revolutionary body sculpting system.
Dr. Fitness USA's body design formula can increase an individual's strength, get this, by 20% to 50%.
Independently of a personal trainer and achieve, this is the kicker, a pain-free life. Now, with working with Steven, just in, 4 workouts I think so far, if that, I have no pain in my knees like I used to.
No surgery, no splint. I was supposed to be in a splint for 8 months.
I mean, I don't have back pain anymore. It's amazing.
This is really exciting news for anyone who wants to keep fit and young. So take action now and be sure to visit drfitnessusa.com to begin your transformation.
Hi, I'm Dr. Blum. You're listening to Health Matters. My guest today is Dr. Fred Blum. We're talking about the idea of ego versus our true nature. Dr. Blum, let's get back to where we were. So somebody comes in to see you. They're having some probably kind of difficulty, I'm guessing, or do some people come to see you just to maximize their ability to perform, but not necessarily troubled by any specific area of life?
That actually, the second tends to be more of who I see. Obviously, we all have troubles in life. We all have challenges.
Sure.
So that comes up. But most of what happens is people, they've heard about the work I do, or, they get referred somehow, and they're just curious. Like you said, I work with a lot of people who are in a high performance environment, whether it's business or whatnot, where
Right.
They're very committed to showing up in the world in a certain way. And, a lot of them have done, or maybe are already involved in a lot of the other type of self-help stuff that's out there.
Sure.
And what I do is a little different, because most of that self-help work is designed to improve the ego side of the equation, and what my perspective is, just kind of be who we are, and then we're going to naturally see a change.
Got it.
We're going to naturally become more effective.
Well, let's look at something here. I
Yeah.
want to look at. I know that as we educate, as we transform, as we evolve through life, we want to spend more time glimpsing our true nature. Let's talk for a moment about how we can live effectively in the world and use our ego as a tool for allowing us to accomplish what we desire, versus not getting mired down in the tool, and the expression and the use of the tool becomes the only thing we have in life, versus having access and glimpsing more our true nature. Let's explore that together.
Okay.
In other words, how can you be in the world, be successful, Fred, and still get more and more glimpses of your true nature? Does that make sense?
Sure. I mean, it's a place to explore from. The glimpses. It's we can do this with or without help. I mean, I want to make that clear.
Right.
It doesn't require that someone like me come along. The glimpses come just from looking in that direction.
Right.
That's almost the kind of unintuitive part for someone, because we're taught to think that it comes from outside of ourselves, that somehow we're going to get it from a book or a guru or some thing
Yes.
outside of ourselves.
The
And
ego talking more.
that's the ego.
Yes,
Exactly.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
The ego, again, the nature of the ego is that it's constantly seeking, constantly searching. So, that's what, when you were reading my bio, I wrote that so long ago. I thought, oh, okay, I hadn't heard that in a while, but it says something about, we start from, the peace, the clarity, the happiness that you are, because most of us are setting goals in life, trying to get that.
Yes.
We're
Yes.
trying to achieve peace and happiness by accomplishing something, by getting the money or the stuff, or the achievements.
Right.
And of course, anyone who's ever been down and played that game, they know it's temporary.
Yeah.
It just never. And I've played it myself. I've done all this stuff in the bio. I've built several successful practices, all that kind of stuff. And I would wake up every morning wondering,
There's got to be more.
there's got to be more. How
Yeah.
come this? I'm not happy. How come after everything that I've done and I've read and I've done everything that it looked like I was supposed to do, how come I'm not happy yet? And it turned out, simply enough, that I was simply looking in the wrong direction.
Got
I
it.
was looking
Okay.
out there
Instead of inside.
To find, exactly.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about that. So you're right. I remember winning a big weightlifting competition many years ago, and I actually remember having this epiphany where I sat there by myself reflecting, and I thought, I don't get it. I'm sure I should feel different. I just won a big tournament, and yet I don't feel any different. My life hasn't changed. How can that possibly be? And so I was obviously looking at accomplishing something to prove to myself that I had a worthy identity. And it did absolutely nothing, and it left me very flat and disappointed.
This is going to sound maybe a tad sacrilegious, but there's the big movement out in the world of self-help and whatnot. We talk about things like self-esteem, self-worth, and that's all about the ego.
Yeah.
It's and you said something before, maybe this would be a good time to bring it up, that the ego is a construct.
Right.
Said differently, it's really just a collection of thoughts, persistent thoughts.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
I mean, if a doctor were to cut open my brain, he's not going to find my ego in there somewhere.
Yes.
He can't, it doesn't exist as an actual thing. It's literally made up. It's something that we began creating, inventing when we were probably around 2 years old, mostly in reaction to things that were happening in our lives that we couldn't understand.
Right.
Because you have to remember something. We are born into oneness. We are born as true nature. And as this is why, I always say people love to be around babies because they remind us of who we are.
Beautiful. Yeah, they reflect outwardly to us what true nature is.
Babies give us everything. They don't hold anything back.
Yeah.
And then, somewhere around, as we, I mean, not that this is the wrong thing to do, but we begin teaching children from the earliest age, we have to convince them that they're separate. So they can fall into that same illusion of separateness.
Yes, isn't that interesting?
That
right. Yeah, somehow there's got to be a better way. And it's paradoxical because you have to have an ego to navigate through the world. I mean, it's a very effective tool for rendering you successful if you use it well.
And again, that's a perfect tool for that.
Yes.
Because it's like, I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't go out and play in the world. In fact, my whole premise is that we just reverse the order of things. In other words, people think I'm going to go out, I'm going to be successful, I'm going to make $1 million, I'm going to get all this stuff, and then
you'll be happy.
When I've exhausted all that, then I'm going to maybe even look into myself and try and discover who I am. Okay, so I'm going to say, rather than starting with the end goal of rather than trying to get to this end goal of happiness, why not start from there? Why not start with a knowing of who we are? So in other words, if we start from knowing that we already are happiness, peace, clarity, love, from there, we can go out in the world and play full out because we know that our happiness isn't at stake.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So our happiness isn't based on achieving success. It's not based on acquiring material things. It's not based on attaining goals. Right. It's already in place, and those things are just nice to, if you will, if you'll excuse me, to add icing to your cake.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and this gets into what I call a game, right? So I have a very simple definition of a game.
Okay.
And it's kind of a functional definition, if you will. A game is simply where you arbitrarily, meaning you make it up, that one thing is more important or better than something else. Okay?
Okay.
So I'll give you an example of that, because most people are going, what the heck is he talking about? So simple example, okay? I'm going to make it up that it is better, I don't know how everybody can see me, but to hit the ball with the stick than to not hit the ball with the stick.
Okay, we're going to use baseball. Got it? Or cricket?
Exactly. Right?
Okay, got it. Okay.
That's a game. We
Right.
made up this rule. Now, once you make up the rule that it's better to hit the ball with the stick, now you have a game. Now you know what winning looks like. You see?
Okay.
It's completely arbitrary. Now, once I understand that, now I have a game. Now, that's the same thing for anything else in life. You can make up, once I know who I am, once I know that my happiness is not dependent on winning or losing the game. Now I can go out and say, okay, I'm going to make up a game. I want to make $1 million. Okay? Why
Okay.
not? It's as good a game as any.
Right.
In the objective world, the world of the ego. So now go out, play full out, contribute to lots of people, create some amazing game. And when you're not bound up, because when winning or losing, when you think it's about you, you're just not effective. It's like it's too hard, it's too costly to play when you think that you're only going to be happy with one outcome.
Right, because sometimes it's very hard to win at a particular game. So, for example, if you say I want to make $1 million this year and you don't, that means that if everything is based on that, you're going to live in a very unhappy state. Exactly. I like that. I love that. I love the way you look at it, Fred. Beautiful.
The reality is, as much as we'd like to think we're in control, we're really not in control. I mean, we have some control. We have control over our actions, etc. Right? But
right.
There's an infinite amount of variables that we cannot control. So, you give it your best shot, just like with baseball. Woohoo! I hit the ball with the stick, right?
Right.
Or darn, I missed the ball with the stick that time. Either way, if you know who you are, you know that ultimately it's okay. Either way, you're still going to be happy. You're still okay.
So with the second way, it's a win-win. Whether you lose, meaning you don't use the ball to effectively hit the stick, you're still in a winning situation.
You win, and you learn, and maybe next time you'll change and you'll find some way to do it a little better.
Right.
But the point of a game is just to play a game. When a 6-year-old is building a sandcastle, he's not like thinking that the sandcastle has to come out a certain way or he's not going to be happy.
Yes.
He's okay either way because he hasn't yet forgotten who he is.
All right, so let's go to the other side and let's now explore what it is to begin to glimpse or to know more about your true self. In other words, how can we understand true self more so that we can redefine the game and the outcomes and our happiness?
Yeah. It's a little bit of a tough question, and I respect the question, but it's tough.
I know. I threw. If we're going to use the stick analogy, I threw you a curveball.
Well, right. Because, and it's, by the way, it's a question that probably is on everyone's mind. So I understand why you would ask it. The challenge is that it's difficult to put words to it.
Well, let's just begin by pointing to it then.
Right, exactly. So, all right, let's look at this, okay? The best way, and all the great teachers, going back to Jesus, understood this, that the best way to try and describe the indescribable is with metaphors. So here's a simple metaphor. Everybody likes to go to the movies,
Right.
So you have the movie screen, and then you're showing different movies on the screen. So you might show on that screen a horror movie or a love story or a science fiction movie. Question, does the screen care what kind of movie is showing on?
Not at all.
Not at all. Is the screen affected in any way by the movie?
Not at all.
Good. Now, in the context of true nature, what I invite you and everyone that's listening to begin to see is that we are the screen, not the movie.
Oh, I love it.
Okay?
I love it.
We have been taught and conditioned to believe that we are the movie.
The movie. Oh, then it puts you in the observer position.
Exactly.
Fred,
right?
we're gonna stop right there. I'm sorry for interrupting you. We're gonna take another commercial break. I'm Dr. Nelson Blumesh. You've joined Dr. Blum and I for Health Matters. We'll be right back.
This is Tim.
And Maria from UI Media Network.
We both know what it's like to own your own business and needing to grow.
Building brand awareness, maximizing your visibility in the community, and reaching new customers is essential in keeping the doors open.
So in the spirit of 2019, we want to offer you a very special price at 50% off for commercial of your own.
So please call now and get on the calendar to get your commercial going for the new year.
So call UI Media Network at 678-495-4345. That's 678-495-4345.
Download the UI Media Smart app at uimediaapp.com to watch and listen to all your favorite shows anytime from anywhere in the world. Shows that enrich, entertain, educate, and feeds the conscious cells throughout your body. We bring you never heard before topics in health, inspiration, music, psychics, numerology, current affairs, controversies, and much, much more. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.uimediaapp.com and start raising your frequency now.
Hello, I'm Dr. Nelson Blumesh, and you've joined us for another episode of Health Matters. I'm speaking to Dr. Fred Blum. We're exploring the notion of ego versus true nature. All right, Dr. Blum, we're talking about, and I love your example, using the screen, that the screen in a movie theater doesn't care whether you play a horror movie, a romance, and equating that to us as a way for us to start to explore getting a deeper glimpse, if you will, or a prolonged glimpse at our true nature. So let's continue that.
Yeah. So, I mean, to continue that, like what happens is we forget, right? We forget that we are the movie. That's true nature.
Yes.
We are, and I'm sorry, not the movie.
The screen. Yeah.
Correct.
I'm sorry. I knew where you were trying. I knew where you were going.
Yes. Yes. And, so we get caught up, if you will. We begin to believe that we are the movie. And that's what happens, right? That's why sometimes life looks like a horror movie.
Yes.
Sometimes it looks like a love story. Sometimes it looks like an action adventure film.
So we forget, if you will, that we're just the screen. We're not the horror movie. We're not the romance. We're not the adventure. We're the screen.
So in essence, what I'm suggesting is that we are not our experiences, good, bad, ugly, whatever they are. We're not the experience. We are the space, if you will, in which the experience occurs.
Say that again.
We are the space.
The space
in which our experience occurs. So here's a little kind of an exercise that might help people to.
Yeah, that's a hard one to get around.
Right, exactly. Well, again, you're the screen.
Yep.
The screen is the space, the background, same thing.
Which the movie occurs.
Right.
Or scene,
okay.
Yeah.
So think of it this way. Here's a kind of a little bit of a thought experiment. Nelson, you're sitting there right now. Can you be aware of your body?
I can be aware of aspects of my body.
Okay, right. Not the whole thing, right? But
yes.
You can be aware of
does that make sense? Did I say that in a way that makes sense? Yeah, with what you were asking?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You can be aware of some different various parts of your body. Okay? Can you be aware that you're having thoughts?
Yes.
Like be aware of your thoughts. This one's maybe a little bit tougher, a little more subtle, but just try it. Just play with it for a moment. Can you be aware of your personality?
Yes, although, I have to sort of sit back and observe who I am and how I'm being here, for example, with you right now, to get a flavor, if you will, of how I'm occurring.
And the only reason that's harder is because we're so identified with this personality that it's difficult for us to kind of separate from it.
Yeah, so it just plays out, in other words. It becomes invisible to me. Like I don't normally think about, well, how exactly am I occurring in the world? I just am in the world.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank
exactly. Now, so here's the key though. If you can be aware of your body, then you can't be your body, right? Because the awareness of something implies that you can't be that something. You with me so far?
you. Okay.
Okay. Same thing. If you can be aware, if you can observe your thoughts, then you can't be your thoughts.
Oh, got it. Okay.
If you, and I know this is a little subtle, but
it takes a minute to get around it.
It does. What we're trying to do is just by noticing these things, it begins to point people towards who they are. Now, what's the point of this? If you're not your body, if you're not your thoughts, but you could be aware of those things, now just notice that you are aware. Just become aware, if you will, of the awareness itself.
And by doing so, you'll begin to glimpse more your true nature.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's funny. You gotta sort of step back for a moment to be with this. The ego is so seductive. It's so hard to get around and to realize that we wield it as a tool and it's part of who we are. It's not the totality of who we are.
Yes, exactly. And who we are is the space of consciousness or awareness behind the ego. That's why you can, with practice, you can even become aware of your ego.
I love it.
But it just, yeah.
So let's look at something here.
Yeah.
As we desire to grow, to transform, you're a transformative coach, and you help people to get a greater awareness of how to merge these two so that you get a more true, I'm going to call it a more true expression of self in the world. Is that fair?
That's great.
So how do you counsel, if you will, Fred, your people to begin to get a better blend so it's not all ego with little to no experience of true nature? Talk me through that. What does that look like?
Yeah.
And I know that's very hard, but
no, it's okay. We'll kind of talk around it. And we'll see we'll get there.
Yeah.
So there's a quote from Scripture that I've always really particularly loved in this context, and it says, when two or more are gathered in my name, there shall I be in their midst. Now, from a strictly, from the technical, strict scriptural viewpoint, we're talking about, when two or more are gathered in Jesus' name, there shall he be in their midst. Now, I'm interpreting it slightly differently.
Okay.
When two or more gather, in other words, you're talking about sitting with a client or anything like that, or even when I do public speaking, group presentations, when two or more gather in the spirit or in the service of true nature, in the service of who we really are, there shall I be in their midst, to me simply means that it amplifies that presence. It amplifies that experience of true nature for both of us. So
fascinating. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I was being with that.
Yeah. What happens is, in that moment, what I experience reproducibly, it's predictable that as we begin to do that, as we begin to together look in this direction,
right,
that there's a shift that's palpable in the room. The room becomes a little more still. People notice that their minds get quieter. They feel more peaceful. And it is literally that space that begins to naturally emerge that really, in my opinion, is where the work gets done. I might get lucky. I might say one or two things in the conversation that are actually useful.
Yes.
But it's the pointing towards who they are that actually is where the work gets done.
I love this idea. I remember hearing a quote, and forgive me, I'm not somebody who is good at reciting quotes perfectly, but the gist of the quote is simply this. John Muir, many years ago, last century, was quoted as saying, "All things exist as a courtesy for all other things." So when I hear you speak, as you just did, it makes me realize how vital it is for us to come together in the spirit of talking collaboratively, particularly about ideas of importance, so that we can magnify the results of comprehension. and expression.
You know, I mean, what we're talking about here is really the only thing that really will change the world.
Yes.
And this is so missed, sadly, you know, that we try so hard to change the world on the external level. This is what the ego does. And it's not that it's wrong.
Right.
You know, like if
well, it's what we know. It's what we know.
Exactly
Yeah.
right. So if we want to go out and clean up garbage in your neighborhood, that's a good thing, you know?
Yes.
But at the same time, when we have an experience of who we are, again, the nature of who we are is already love, compassion, peace. We simply behave in a different way. People who do things, I mean, terrorism, you know, polluters, you know, people who are doing things like this on a global scale, they simply are so out of touch with true nature.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not saying right now I have some brilliant solution of how to bring this to the entire planet, but that is ultimately the only thing that's going to change them.
Interesting.
And by now you think we'd know better, because, I mean, we've been trying to change it from the external for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Yeah, and it's generally not particularly effective.
Look where we are.
Yeah.
You know?
It's funny because it's such a paradox.
It is.
Because you can't be foolish and come purely from let's love each other and keep your door open and have somebody break in and steal your things. So what I'm reflecting on at this time is that there has to be a way where we can get a better understanding of how we access our ego as a tool and allow the true expression to be more of a guide, if you will, of the tool.
Well, you say it, you know, it's the perfect term, right? The ego is a tool.
Yes.
Like when I'm using a hammer, I don't confuse the hammer with who I am.
Right. Yes.
Exactly.
I love that. Yes.
So the only way to really understand the ego as a tool is to begin to get an understanding of who we are. Now, it's important to make this distinction here for people that have been listening for 40 minutes or so, that there are two different ways that you can listen to this entire conversation, because it's not I'm not just dispensing information here, right? So there's two ways you can listen. You can listen for what I would call intellectual understanding.
Yes.
And that's how we're taught to listen, frankly. That's how they teach us to listen in school, is just for the answer. So, you know, intellectual understanding is just kind of trying to, like, I sometimes call it adding one more fact to the pile of facts in your head.
Right.
So it doesn't really do us a whole lot of good. It just adds more information.
Okay. Data collecting, data mining.
Data collecting. And typically, by the way, when we're listening from that perspective, we're basically listening for one of two things. I either agree or I don't agree.
Right.
If I don't agree, 95% of the time, I'm just going to shut down. I'm just going to stop listening, you know, and I'm going to be thinking of ways to refute what you're saying. If I do agree, I'm typically listening for how that fits in with the information that I already have in my head. So that's one version. The other version is what I call listening for insight. And when we're listening for insight, we're not trying to understand it intellectually. We're just allowing that what's being shared to sort of touch us, to impact us in a way that it bypasses the intellect. It almost bypasses the ego. And this is the difference, okay? When someone's listening, like if I'm having a coaching conversation with someone and they're listening from intellect, they're going,
right.
Like you could hear, they're like,
got that fact, got that fact, got that fact.
Exactly.
Right.
When someone's listening for insight, it's like they're just listening and all of a sudden they go, oh, you could see like something touched them.
Yeah.
And one insight at that level changes everything. You know, you ask, how can we begin to get a better sense of our true nature? This is the only way to get it. It has to almost sneak up on you, because the ego, which is constantly, again, trying to understand, trying to figure things out, isn't going to be effective at this. So sometimes I say, listen, almost like we're listening to music.
Right.
When you listen to music, you're not trying to figure it out. You're just kind of letting it in.
Yeah, you're experiencing it.
You're experiencing it. So when you listen to this kind of a conversation, if you just kind of turn your mind off a little bit and just kind of let it in,
observe,
witness, you might notice that somehow you don't know what it is, but you notice that you start to feel more peaceful.
Right. Fred, I
And
hate to
somebody-
interrupt. We've got to take our last commercial break, my friend. Folks, we'll be right back. I'm Dr. Nelson Bulmash. My guest is Dr. Fred Blum, a transformational life coach, and we're exploring the notion of ego versus true nature. We'll be right back for our final segment.
Are you ready to be the hero of your own story? It's time to put the power of your health back into your hands. Join us for our free 25-day journey to get your life back now from chronic illness. Our doctors and experts will guide you back to optimal health.
In my opinion, there is not a drug in the world for a chronic disease that I would consider. Not one. Acute, yes. You got appendicitis, of course, I prefer to take it out. You know, they're now treating appendicitis with 3 weeks of bed rest and antibiotics. I'd rather have it taken out. I think it's safer than taking antibiotics for 3 weeks. And surgery, fine, wonderful, go with it. But the incidence of suicide, once they put you on antidepressants, which do not work, there are 4 major articles saying if all the negative studies had been allowed by the pharmacomafia to be published, the net results would be 0.
Go to www.getyourlifebacknow.live and begin your journey today.
Hi, this is Dr. Nelson. You've joined us for Health Matters. I'm speaking to my friend and colleague, Dr. Fred Blum, and we're looking at the ego versus true nature. Fred, I'm going to throw you a knuckleball here, and it's a question there really isn't an answer to, but I want to see where you go with it. We live in a time that seems so divided right now. There seem to be 2 sort of fundamental camps. We have people who are all about, and I'm not judging this, by the way, I'm just observing this, that are about let's find solutions. Let's come from a spirit of love. Let's come from a spirit of cooperation, versus those who say, look, it's all here for the plundering. We're going to do whatever we want to the earth. We're going to do whatever we want to the people of the earth. We're going to accumulate as much wealth and power as we can. We're not interested in the love. We're not interested in the peace. We're here to do what we want to do. What do you do? How do you look at a situation to invite, in the spirit of cooperation, a place of commingling where both sides can find some value and some peace in cooperating?
So we're going to basically solve all the world's problems in the next 15 minutes.
No, Fred, I'm giving you 5.
5.
Well, I've got other questions. I just want to see. I'm sorry. I know I'm giving you a question that's multivariable calculus in its how complicated it is. But this is a real consideration right now. I just kind of want to see where you go with this.
And here's what occurred to me as you were asking the question. True nature, again, who we are as love, peace, clarity, isn't passive. You see, true nature. And that's a common sort of spiritual misconception that if I really am coming from love, I can't take action. Well, if I'm walking through, the supermarket, and I notice maybe a mom beating her kid, from a place of really from love, I might step over. Obviously depending on the circumstances and whatnot.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that I'm going to condemn the mother. You see, the condemnation would be my ego saying, yes, how dare you? What a terrible person you are. But you step over in the spirit of love. You step over in such a way that says, it looks like you guys are having a hard time. Is there anything I can do to help? Now, I understand, half the time someone's going to say, get away from me. This is none of your business. But my experience is that when you come from that space of love, you're more likely to be received. you know? So, you know, there's no formula here, but when we're coming from who we are, we show up in the world differently. We take a different kind of action. Uh, Regarding, you know, the dichotomy that you created between the people who maybe really believe in this and then the people who are just trying to get what they can, you know, it's a tricky situation because the way it appears, at least from an ego perspective in the objective world, it looks like the people that are plundering the earth currently have all the power.
It certainly appears that way. And I don't, notice I use the word appear because I think ultimately, Fred, for us to really be activated, to take loving action, peaceful action, this perspective, this mentality has to emerge to bring people together. Because if it's a clash of egos, we have war. And with war, there can only be death, there can only be damage, there can only be annihilation.
And nobody wins.
And nobody wins. Yeah.
You know, and again, this is not an easy answer, but I've been saying this for years, that the only solution is consciousness. People have to wake up to who they are. And they have to wake up in sufficient numbers that it begins to spread.
Right.
Because we're all like tuning forks. You know, we all know innately, no matter how unconscious you are, no matter how far you are on that side of the spectrum where you're trying to get whatever you want just for you, we all have this echo, however faint it may be, of true nature within us.
Love that.
And the more people that wake up to who they are, the more as tuning forks, that vibration will go out onto, you know, to a wider and wider range, that eventually even the most disconnected people will begin to wake up.
I love that, Fred. I want to share. I'm sorry. Did I interrupt you? I want to share an interesting story about Buddha that I just love. There's a famous story about Buddha where a gentleman wanted to challenge him, and so he followed him throughout India. And when he finally found him, he started to be very, very aggressive, very, very nasty to Buddha. And Buddha stared at him. And when he was finally done, as the story goes, Buddha looks at this gentleman and says, "Sir, are you now done?" And the man's shocked because he's so calm. And he says, "Yes, I'm done." And Buddha says to him, "I have a question for you. Will you allow me to ask you a question?" And he shakes his head in disbelief, like that he's so calm. And he says, "Oh, okay, what's your question?" And he says, "It's simply this. If a man offers another man a gift, but the man does not receive the gift, who then does the gift belong to?" And the man paused for a moment, reflected, and he said, "Well, it belongs to the man who originally had the gift to give." And he said, "Very good. Then you may have your gift. I am not receiving it today."
Mm-hmm. That's nice.
I love that story because at some point we need that kind of love and clarity where it's like, look, this is who I am. I'm not receiving this. I'm not taking on this. This is not how my life will be expressed in the world.
Exactly. You know, and however, like, you know, if you are so led, because, you know, I mean, if you look at our current political climate, you know, it's so polarized. It's so us versus them.
Yeah, ego driven. Yep.
Ego driven. It's 100% ego driven. And not, again, because we all have it within us, the capacity, the spark of love and peace and clarity. But it gets so obscured, so covered up by the ego and this, you know, the being right and you're wrong and all this kind of thing that, you know, I mean, honestly, you know, when have you ever seen a political argument where either person left agreeing with the other?
Yeah,
you know?
it doesn't happen. Fred, I want to ask you a quick question. I hate to say this, we're down to 5 minutes. Share a story, if you will, about somebody, because you've had a lot of really successful people. Share a quick story about somebody who is very ego-driven, very successful, worth tens of millions to hundreds of millions of dollars, who in the end wasn't happy. There's a particular story you shared with me, if I'm triggering your memory. Share that story real quickly. And
just when you're talking about, well, yeah, I mean, this goes back a long time, probably about 15 years. And back then I was in New York, living in New York, and I had a a gentleman come in to see me. His name was Richard. And Richard was a very, very successful real estate developer in New York City, worth, again, like you say, high eight figures, probably 80 or 90 million.
Okay.
And Richard was miserable, frankly. He went on for probably 7 or 8 minutes straight of just going on about how he doesn't understand why his life, like he's not happy, right? He doesn't understand it, and nobody seems to, appreciate him. He's got all the stuff that he's supposed to have that's supposed to make him happy. The $10 million house and the beautiful wife and the kids in private school and the cars and the boats and the private plane. And the challenge that Richard really had faced is that he had reached the kind of the apex of what the external world can give you.
Right.
There was just no more achievements, no more levels to achieve. Because if $80 million doesn't do it, do you really think 100 million will?
No.
So I remember that moment where Richard had spoken. I'd heard enough, basically, and I put up my hand and I said, Richard, what if you could have everything in your life that you've worked so hard for and still have peace in your heart? And Richard teared up, which I remember I shared with you.
Yes,
Richard
you
was
did.
not a man who cried. Richard was a man who made other people cry, because people were terrified of him. But what he saw was that in his world, he had made it like there was no going back. Like he knew that there was this truth of who he really was, but he felt as though his success in the world somehow disqualified him from attaining that, as though the two were mutually exclusive. And my message has always been that, and you started with this in the very beginning, is that we can have both. It's just that we have to remember who we are. Having an amazing life with cars and boats and private planes doesn't take away from your true nature one tiny bit, unless you forget
that it's a game.
Unless you forget that it's a game.
Fantastic.
As long as you remember that who you are is beyond all of that. Again, as Jesus says, be in the world, but not of the world. Then you can have everything you want and still have peace.
Fantastic. Fred, I'm going to give you 60 seconds. I wish I could give you more. Final thoughts, my friend.
Yeah, wow. Well, first of all, thank you so much. I so appreciate the opportunity. I realize that some of the things we've shared here are probably not the simplest things to grasp, but I believe in my heart that the opportunity for any individual to begin to explore true nature and to begin to discover who they are is the final basis to create the lives that we truly desire. All we really want is to be happy.
Right.
Why do we try and find all this stuff in the world? We think it's going to make us happy. So if we can really just start with who we are, then the world becomes a playground. And that's the goal that I have for my clients. It's the goal that I have for your listeners, that we learn to see the world for really what it is. And we do that by discovering who we are.
Fantastic. Fred, quickly, how may people reach out to you?
Sure. They can find me on the web. My website is www.energyrichliving, just like it sounds, energyrichliving.net. Or you're welcome to send me an email if you have questions. If this is something that kind of sparked your curiosity, perhaps, and you'd like to explore it further, send me an email at drfred, drfred, @energyrichliving.net. And I'll be more than happy. We'll set up a time to actually speak on the phone and see if I can. This is a conversation that sometimes is much easier to do one-on-one.
Yes, absolutely.
So
Fred, I hope you'll hold on for a moment. I've got to close out the show. Thank you very, very much. Folks, Dr. Nelson Bulmesh here. I will be here March 19th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time interviewing Terrence Hutchinson. Join me then. Okay.
Thank you for joining us on this edition of Health Matters with Dr. Nelson Bulmesh, where we help you discover how to ignite your mind, body, and spirit connection. Join us next time when we will bring you more exciting guests and engaging topics. Meanwhile, feed your mind, exercise your body, and nurture your spirit. The United Intentions Foundation and its associates take no responsibility for the opinions and statements made by the talk show hosts or their guests.